On the savings that have been made, arising out of the cost-saving measures that President Mahama has introduced, I'm not sure that I put a specific figure on it. I don't recall ever putting a specific figure. What I can say for certain is that significant savings have been made, and it's not difficult to see why this is so. So, for instance, let's use 2 reference points. There was a time when we had, 125 ministers or so under the Akufo-Addo administration. Currently, we have 58. It should have been 60, but for the unfortunate tragedy that occurred on August 6th. Now, even if you picked the figure of 60, and you did an analysis of what it would require to keep 125 people at posts as ministers and deputy ministers, that alone is significant. Let me give you practical examples. So, every minister of state, indeed, if I show you my appointment letter, you will see that there are things that you are entitled to enable you to do your work. One of them is a 4-wheel drive, a Land Cruiser. You are also entitled to a saloon car. These are duty post vehicles. They are not vehicles that are gifted to you. You use them as and when. But often it is the case that a new one is procured, because invariably by the time that a new government comes, what exists may not be roadworthy or may not have the capacity to perform at a high level that is expected. So often a new one will be procured. You are also entitled to accommodation. And that means that existing government bungalows would have to be refurbished for you to move in. If you are not given a bungalow, then you are given 20% of your basic salary as rent allowance every month, and it is at market rates. In addition to that, if you check my appointment letter, you see that you are entitled to fuel, a certain amount of fuel every week. And then there's a salary that you take, which these days is consolidated to include other perks and emoluments. And then in the days that ex gratia held sway, you will be paid ex gratia, which is 4 months out of every year that you serve in office. Now, the price of one Land Cruiser at current market rate, a standard Land Cruiser that a government official of the rank of a minister or deputy minister must use, is about $120,000, and I'm sure you all know it. There are some that are more expensive, but I think the standard one is $120,000. A saloon car of the sort that the minister or deputy minister would use is about $50,000 to $60,000, depending on the brand that is purchased for you. Now, if at a point there were 125 ministers, and now there are 60 or even 50, let's say 60, just for purpose of analysis, it means that you are avoiding purchasing 65 Land Cruisers at a unit cost of $120,000. You are not going to buy 65 saloon cars at a cost of between $50,000 to $60,000. You are not going to have to spend money refurbishing 65 bungalows or paying, in lieu of that, 20% of basic salaries of 65 people as rent allowance every month. You don't have to pay fuel. And you know how much it costs to fill a Land Cruiser in a saloon car. So you don't have to pay that. And then you don't have to pay salaries of those people. You don't have to bear their travel costs and other things that they are entitled to. And then when they finish their service, you don't have to pay ex gratia to 65 people. When you put that together, you are talking of tens of millions of Ghana cedis, and that is just for ministers alone. When you come to the presidency, in addition to the 125 ministers that we had under President Akufo-Addo at some point, there was a time when they had up to 361 staff. And I'm not talking presidential staffers. The staff of the office of the president, that is the political staff, are grouped into 2 or 3. There are presidential staffers. I heard somebody say that presidential staffers acted as deputy ministers. No, they are not. In terms of entitlements, they are equivalent to ministers, presidential staffers. So when you hear somebody referred to as a presidential staffer, in terms of entitlements, they don't function as ministers, but in terms of what they earn and their package that goes with their office, they are equivalent to ministers. Presidential aides are equivalent to deputy ministers in terms of their service conditions. And then there are political staff who are staff of these staffers and presidential. For instance, if you go to the president's office, there's the president himself. There is the chief of staff. There's a secretary to the president. There's a legal counsel. And then there are other senior advisors. These advisors don't work alone. They also have staff that they work with. So if you put all of that together, there was a point that we had about 361 under President Akufo-Addo. I think about 41 staffers or so who by virtue of that position would be entitled to the conditions of service of ministers and deputy ministers. So the 125 land cruisers would come with another 40 land cruisers and 40 saloon cars, 40 bungalows, or 40 sets of payments of rent allowance, 40 sets of payment of fuel for every week, and then all the other conditions that they are attached. So you do not really need a soothsayer to tell you how colossal the cost to government was to have that number of people. The fact and reality now is that we have fewer people in government now than we did under the previous administration. So significant savings have been made. That cannot be disputed. That must be placed on record. The second bit is about the chiefs compound. Now, it is not my policy. I spoke about it, announced it, but it is government policy. What it is that Akosia, this year, and indeed if you followed the budget for 2026 carefully, you find that government intends to begin the implementation of the free primary health care policy, which was a cardinal policy proposal in our health section of our manifesto. It is something that President Mahama himself spoke to on many occasions. Now, primary health care, the medical experts will tell you, often takes place in lower level health facilities. And when we talk of primary health care, we are talking about basic minor diseases, headaches, stomach aches, and non-serious ailments which require attention. Now, currently, the arrangement is such that referral facilities like district hospitals, regional hospitals, tertiary hospitals, and what have you, are burdened with many of these illnesses. So normally, it should be a CHIPS compound, a health center, or at most a polyclinic that handles these kinds of ailments. Now, government's policy is that going forward, starting from this year, there should be some segregation. And indeed, if you check the budget, about 1.5 billion Ghana cedis has been earmarked for that, so that these minor ailments are treated at a lower level. Now, the most basic building block in the health sector is a CHIPS compound, which ensures that this level of care is administered. There are many places in Ghana that do not have it. And I come from Abra Sebu Kamankese, so I know. There are 265 communities, but we have less than 30 CHIPS compounds. So you see the kind of pressure that is brought to bear on the referral facility at Abu Dunkwa, or the health centers that are dotted around Abakrampa and Muri. So to address this gap, government decided that the District Assembly's Common Fund, the disbursement of it should come with guidelines, because, mind you, the president has also said that up to 80% of all monies accruing to the District Assembly's Common Fund should go to the District Assemblies, which is a departure from the arrangements under the NPP where disbursements were made at the center and left very little for the districts. In order that the disbursement of those funds align with government's overarching objectives like free primary health care and what have you, guidelines were sent. And in those guidelines, every assembly was directed to construct a minimum of 2 CHIPS compounds. There are 261 district assemblies. So that alone gives you in excess of 520 CHIPS compounds. And then there are some that started under the previous administration that have not been finished. If you come to AK, for example, there are 2 or 3 of such which were started but got nowhere. And therefore, they also have to be completed. Now, I can assure you that that project is far advanced. I'm an ex-official member of the District Assembly at AAK, so I know for a fact that if you go to a place called Nyamedom and Uhiaba, we started and are almost done with 2 CHIPS compounds. As I speak to you, the procurement process to buy hospital equipment to furnish those CHIPS compounds are underway. And indeed, we are only a matter of weeks away from commission. I'm sure I'll be doing the commissioning myself. So if you come to AK, you see that that project is very far advanced and only weeks away from commission. And the same can be said for many, many districts in Ghana. And in fact, as I indicated, the local government minister, under whose auspices this initiative, because he has jurisdiction over district assemblies, will be here sometime next week. He can give you a breakdown. I've been in touch with him and he indicates that they still are collating the specific details and data, and he will give you that. But I can assure you that it is a program that is far advanced, and it will be in fulfillment of government policy of beginning the free primary healthcare initiative this year. Now, you asked about the status of some petitions, specifically the one relating to the special prosecutor and the electoral commissioner and her two deputies. Let me indicate that unlike the petition against the Chief Justice, the President's mandate in respect of the petitions against the OSP and the electoral commissioner and her two deputies ends with conveying the petitions to the appropriate quarter, which in this instance is the Chief Justice. That was done a couple of weeks ago. I think I announced same. A total of 10 petitions were received from various individuals and groups, 7 of them against the electoral commissioner and her two deputies, and 3 against the OSP, all of which have been sent to the Chief Justice. So the President has no role again in that. And in that regard, we cannot speak to it. I, as the President's spokesperson, cannot speak to it because I honestly do not know where things are. The Chief Justice's outfit will be in a good position to, maybe you may want to send inquiries to the Judicial Secretary for an update. The President will once again be called upon to act in that regard when the Chief Justice is done with determining prima facie whether there is a basis for it. When that happens, the Chief Justice will then set up a committee. In the case of the OSP, there are specific timelines that need to be met, but I don't think that similar timelines exist for the electoral commission and 2 deputies. So once a determination is made one way or the other on the veracity of the petitions so presented, then the President is mandated by law to act in accordance with the recommendations of the committee that will look into those petitions. So that is the process. But as I speak to you, there's nothing more for the President to do beyond waiting for the Chief Justice to do what the Constitution says he should do.